Welcome everyone to the Journey to Great webinar series, powered by Nationwide. Today we will be talking about the future of work, embracing flexible work in every industry, a conversation with Great Place to Work and leaders at Atlassian, Marriott International, and Wegmans Food Markets. I'm your host, Ceci Riva-Mascara, Director of Demand Generation at Great Place to Work US, and my pronouns are she, hers. I've been with Great Place to Work for more than 16 years, not only because this is a great place to work, but most importantly because I believe in the work that we do and the positive impact towards every individual, to organizations, and our environment. I'm based in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and I'm very excited to share this important conversation, one that I know many of you are eager to learn from the best. For those of you who may have missed our link to our latest research report while we waited to start the broadcast, we'll make sure to show it again at the end of this webinar. Before we get started, let me share some housekeeping notes. Everyone is on mute, and you should only hear panelists. The last 15 minutes of today's webinar, we will go over your questions. So please submit them at any time using your question panel in the top right of your screen. You will see a conversation icon with a question mark. For those who may need or want closed captions, you will find a button on the bottom right-hand corner where you can enable this function. At Great Place to Work, we love feedback. Once the webinar ends, we invite you to answer the 4-question survey that will pop on your screen. We want to hear from your experience. This webinar is being recorded. You will be receiving an email with a link to watch the webinar and share with colleagues and friends afterwards. Great Place to Work is also recognized by SHRM Professional Credits. For those who attend live and fill in the survey, you will receive the credit on your follow-up email. Now let's get started. We're joined by 3 great leaders from Great Place to Work certified companies who are among Fortune's 100 best companies to work for in 2024. Atlassian, Marriott International, and Wegmans Food Markets, all companies who are redefining and embracing flexible work. Annie Dean is the global head of Team Anywhere at Atlassian, where she is responsible for the company's shift of more than 11,000 people to a distributed work mode. Annie oversees the real estate and workplace experience teams and the Team Anywhere Lab, a dedicated group of behavioral scientists focused on designing and validating evidence-based ways of working. Prior to Atlassian, Annie was Meta's first director of remote work, where she created and led a portfolio of future of work strategies. Diana Merida is the Vice President of Change Management and Work Experience at Marriott International, leading change management for global human resources and charged with evolving the Marriott associate work experience. She explores the connections and interplay between people, data, and technology, and how and where work gets done. Diana's responsibilities have spanned driving people's change initiatives at Marriott Properties to the transition to a hybrid work model, workspace, and technology enablement at the company's new headquarters campus. Blaine Forgill is the Senior Vice President of Store Operations for the Mid-Atlantic region at Wegmans Food Markets, where he's responsible for the successful operations of 28 stores and growth strategies and expansion. Guided by Wegmans' core values, Blaine and his team provide servant leadership to support the growth and development of 11,000 employees by creating a great place to work where each employee feels heard, seen, and integral to Wegmans' success. Starting as a part-time cashier, Blaine grew his career at Wegmans through various leadership roles during his 40-year tenure. Last but never least, leading this discussion is Rula Amiri, our Senior Content Director of Great Place to Work. Rula is our expert on employee engagement, well-being, purpose, and other aspects of workplace. Her expertise in storytelling, content strategy, writing, and editing elevates our mission of helping every place become a great place to work for all. Rula also hosts our podcast Better. If you haven't checked it, please look at it. It's amazing. And don't forget to subscribe and get notifications of our latest episodes. Next season is starting in the fall. Welcome, Annie, Diana, Blaine, and Rula. We're so excited for today's discussion. And I'll pass it on to you, Rula, so we can dig into the conversation.
Great. Thanks so much, Ceci. And a big thank you to our panelists for joining today. We're all here to learn how to create flexibility for workers, no matter the industry we're in. I know our conversation is going to be inspirational, helpful, and practical. Before we begin, I just want to set the stage for our conversation. We know flexible work is top of mind to all of us. That's why we're here. I know it's something many of you are still trying to figure out, and we are here to help at Great Place to Work. It's why we released new research on the subject in our latest report called Return to Office Mandates and the Future of Work. And we're going to talk about some of those findings today. We all know employees want flexibility at work, but what that looks like varies. There's no one size fits all. Great workplaces like the companies we have on our panel today know that. Right? So they've listened to their people and they've responded to their unique needs. That is the hallmark of a high trust culture. And I just would encourage us all to keep that in mind in our conversation today. It's not where you work or the industry you work in that creates your experience at work. It's who you work for. That's what our research has told us for 40 plus years at Great Place to Work. You're going to have a better time at work if your company has a great culture than if it has an average culture, even if that average culture has no mandates and you can work wherever you want. That's what the data tells us. So remote work isn't going to solve your culture problems if you don't have a foundation of trust. So with that said, let's dive in. So we're in this space of being in charge of people, and we all see the news and headlines. We know many companies are mandating workers come back into the office, and they cite culture, camaraderie, productivity as reasons for the mandate, but our data doesn't support that. It actually shows the opposite. It shows that companies that mandate where their people work have lower levels of productivity, retention, recruitment. And employees at those companies also have worse relationships with their managers. But when employees or their teams can choose where they work, all those levels improve. And you can see those data points and those numbers in our report. That doesn't mean in-person connection isn't important. It is. It's very important, but which we'll talk about. But mandating work location is different. So Annie, I'd love to start the conversation with you. Atlassian is a tech company. Your headquarters are in Silicon Valley, and you don't have mandates. You have just the opposite. You have a team anywhere model where employees can choose where they want to work. It's been extremely successful, which is supported by our data. And we'll talk results later in the conversation. But to begin, for people who are curious about this model and are thinking of trialing something similar, can you share some best practices?
Yes. So Atlassian is a company that was founded in Australia 20 years ago. And that means we've always had to work across distance in order to make our business run, which has made it easier, for us to be early adopters of what we call distributed work. I think a lot of companies who are faced with these challenges have to think about what their first principles are and why they want to build this type of program. And for us, it was all about the opportunity to get better talent faster, to innovate for our customers, and to give people the opportunity to make choices about their lives that would yield higher engagement and greater loyalty to the company. And our research has shown that all of those things are true, which is really, really exciting. One of the things that's very interesting about Atlassian's business, you mentioned that we're a software business, is that we build collaboration software that helps teams collaborate together no matter where they are. So we have tools like Jira, Loom, and Confluence that help us get work done. And that gives us a commercial incentive to continue to experiment with how to get work done. That lets us take big swings and risks and, build for a 100-year company with a long-term view. So when we think about how to make this new world of work happen, as the head of Team Anywhere, I'm thinking about solving two key challenges. The first is to keep teams connected, and the second is to keep teams effective. Because in the old model, where teams and people and companies were organized in an office setting, they were able to stay connected because they bumped into each other every day. And they were able to stay effective because they could tap each other on the shoulder. And now we have an opportunity to do both of those things in more strategic, more impactful ways, but we have to make choices and investments that support that reality. So on the connection front, we have something called intentional togetherness gatherings. This is where we use our 12 global offices, and we have offices where people are never required to attend them, and yet attendance remains healthy at all of them on an ongoing basis because people feel excited about going there, despite the fact that they're not compelled to. Um, and we use our offices to bring global teams together for about 3 to 5 days, basically a working week's time in the office setting. Often people travel to go there and they work on problems that they can get lost in, they can turn off the timer, and they really focus on really connecting with each other. And what we found was that in using that model, it was extraordinarily important. It improved team connection by 27%, and that team connection remained high for 4 to 5 months, meaning that teams didn't need to reconvene until 4 to 5 months later. When we looked at sporadic office attendance as a predictor of team connection, we found that it had zero impact. So again, when we're thinking about how to design these programs, compelling people to go to the office on a weekly or preset schedule did not drive team connection, but intentionally bringing people together in a setting where they could really spend real time together for a week every once in a while was incredibly impactful and long lasting. On the sense of being effective, which is the other big thing, again, if you can tap people on the shoulder, grab them to go into a conference room, you're now disrupting that model by introducing flexibility in distributed work. And we have a behavioral science team called the Team Anywhere Lab that studies specifically how to stay effective in this environment. And we've learned that there are about 5 behaviors that every team can start doing today. The first is that whenever you're in a video setting, you're in a meeting setting, set it up Brady Bunch style, like we are right now. Everybody has one camera for each of their faces. Conference room technology keeps getting better and better at this. Shortly, it will be really easy to go into a conference room and have every space split into a video and then incorporate virtual participants in a totally equal way. The second is to use meetings in a very structured way. So we have something called page-led meetings, where we show up to a meeting with a 3-minute read, a 3 to 5 minute read using Confluence, our core page material or product. And that represents very rigorous thinking that enables everyone in the meeting to get up to speed within the first 5 minutes. So a 30-minute block of time can be used to have substantive discussion and make decisions instead of spending 17 minutes on a verbal rehash. The next is that you should try to eliminate as many meetings as possible. Don't use, meetings to share information, and use asynchronous tools like Loom, which is one of our products that has kind of the opportunity to record a message that people can engage with socially, they can respond to, and that should save many hours of meeting time because you can share unstructured and personal messages. It's almost like TikTok for the enterprise. The fourth is to become an extraordinary writer. So my favorite framework is Smart Brevity, which was developed by Axios. And that's the idea that anybody that you're trying to communicate with has only 22 seconds of time to absorb a message. And so you want to make sure that what you're writing is for your reader and not just an opportunity to express yourself. And then finally, you really want to know what matters, what clear work needs to be done so that you can organize your time to get that work done. Currently, people's calendars have 30 minutes back to back to back to back, and they don't have enough time to do the deep individual or collaborative focus work that requires people to make progress with speed. So those are the 5 tips that I have to make sure that you are doing distributed work well.
Thank you, Annie. Thanks for those practical and helpful takeaways. Um, Now, there are industries where employees can't choose where they work, like retail and hospitality, but that doesn't mean you can't offer flexibility for your workers who are primarily on the front line. Both Wegmans and Marriott have incorporated flexibility in different ways, be it schedule, role, or location. So Diana and Blaine, I'd love to hear you share some ways you've added flexible options for your people. Diana, why don't you start and Blaine can follow.
Sure, I'm happy to. Thank you for having me. Yeah, well, maybe first let me just touch quickly on our corporate population. Um, for our offices associates, we also remain committed to a hybrid work environment. We do not have a mandate, but we do believe in the power of in-person connections. So we are a hospitality company. We are in the business of bringing people together, and we think that that's just as important in work as it is in travel. So we do emphasize with our associates the importance of spending a meaningful part of their time in the office. And we really have put it on our leaders to continue having ongoing conversations around how they're going to activate hybrid work for their team and the expectations that they're going to set, the team norms that they're going to establish, so that associates can find the right blend of virtual and in-person work that is right for them, for the business, and they can do that within a day, within a week, or within a month. However, the other 90% of our workforce is the front line, and flexibility is a bit tougher of a nut to crack when that, as far as that's concerned. These are the folks that are, staffing our hotels, who are serving our guests every day. So if you think about, someone who's at the front desk, someone who's in housekeeping, what can flexibility look like for someone like them? So as we put together our flexibility program for our property workforce, we were just guided by our Marriott core values, two of which are putting people first, and the second, embrace change. And so we just made it all about choice. So we thought about it like, if we cannot provide flexibility in where you work, could we at least provide flexibility in when you work? And then increasingly, we're doing a lot with flexibility in roles. So I'll take you through just a couple of these examples, components of this program. If you take flexible scheduling, this is something that we piloted to resounding success and have since expanded to all of our hotels in the US and Canada. And it means that managers and associates work together to create schedules that suit the associates' preferences. And that's in both, terms of the number of hours a week as well as that schedule. So for instance, you could opt for split shifts, 4 hours in the morning, 4 in the evening, or you may prefer longer shifts or only working on the weekends. And so when you think about it, the type of flexibility that this might appeal to, the student who needs to work around classes, or a parent who, might only be able to work midday shifts where their child is in school, or a retiree or anyone else who might be looking to earn just some extra money by picking up shifts. As you can imagine, this is very different than the way our industry used to work, where managers just sort of set the schedule. And a huge key aspect of this is the consistency that you get from this, that associate understanding that this is their set schedule. And that's something that just didn't exist before. Some other components of this strategy include compressed work week, where associates work longer hours and fewer days. We offer job sharing, where 2 associates share 1 full-time position. And depending on the role, we do offer some hybrid or full-time remote work. So if you think about more of the back office functions like finance or marketing, we do offer that as well. And then the other component, when I mentioned flexibility in roles, was another kind of question we posed to ourselves as we were, largely coming out of the pandemic, where, everyone was interested in flexibility, not just those sitting behind a desk. And one of the things was flexibility in growth and how one really advances in their career and the options that are afforded to them. And so we have what we call integrated jobs, or iJobs, and they combine what had previously been multiple roles into one job. And in this way, associates gain a broader skill set, They get more exposure to other teams, other leaders, and they end up just better positioned to grow their career along myriad paths, often more quickly. And because they're qualified to work in a variety of areas, they can take on more shifts, different shifts, which of course then has the added benefit of scheduling flexibility for the hotel leadership team. We've also found that guests are benefiting because it's a more seamless experience for them when you don't have associates handing off a guest to different folks for different aspects of their experience at the hotel. And that's been really powerful, we've seen in our results. So I know that we'll spend some more time on some of the measurement pieces of it later, but I think the principal takeaway for us has just been that we know flexibility should not look the same for every associate. But we are committed to offering choice and helping associates shape the way that works for them.
Blaine, would you like to share what's happening at Wegmans? Thanks, Diana.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Rula, for having us. We always strive to be best in class for work-life flexibility. You know, being a retailer in each of our stores having 300 to 400 employees plus, and also having a portion of our population that's in corporate distribution and manufacturing, we have to find a good balance. Part of the opportunity that we recognize sort of post-pandemic was to really put our philosophy into words and standards so that it was transparent to all of our folks, regardless of where they work, as well as any future candidates, and it was also equitably applied. We try to be really clear when we're piloting something in a portion of our company so that everybody understands that it's a pilot versus a company-wide offering, and it just helps to, just have folks understand that it may be coming, but we're not quite there yet. We never want to roll something out company-wide without testing first. As an example, one of the things that we try to do, many of our positions in our corporate office have the ability to be remote or are remote. We do leave some of that up to our folks to help determine when they need to be in the office and when they can work from home. And a small thing that we've done is ensure that anybody that's working remote, especially when they're dealing with the frontline folks in the stores, we've got a background or a couple backgrounds they can choose from that look like they're in a store somewhere. So it's a small consideration, but it's one that helps our store employees not feel like, wow, they get to work from home and I can't. So additional things that we're doing, we really have focused on flexible scheduling, similar to what Diane referenced, and more predictive scheduling. We've worked throughout our company to allow our full-time employees to pick a set day off a week, a weekday. And then we're also piloting in a division or divisions where we've challenged our leaders to ensure that our folks are getting a full weekend a month off. Being in retail, you can understand that weekends are really, really busy. Our busiest days of the week in most stores are Saturday and Sunday, but it's important to intentionally try through this pilot to get folks a full weekend a month off so that they can have work-life balance. A part of that, though, conflicts with, well, if you have a set day a week off, how do you then get a full weekend a month off? And that's where, through this pilot, we're learning through feedback. We've had some employees tell us that, I like my set day a week off. That's more important than getting a full weekend a month off. So we work with them. And then, we'll see where ultimately the pilot lands and whether that's something that can be considered further in our company. We also piloted a 4-day work week in some of our upstate New York markets. Initially, we had a number of employees that thought, wow, I'd like the extra day a week off. But a number of those folks came back and said, working 4 10-hour days, that's a lot physically. And being on my feet that long isn't necessarily what I thought it would be. And I prefer to go back to 5 days a week. And again, we worked with them to help them with what they wanted to do. Additionally, in our stores, we have recruiters in each of our stores for the most part. And working with our HR folks at our corporate office, we've been able to identify the opportunity for those recruiters to work from home at least 3 days a week. In many cases, they're individual contributors that are on the phone or using Teams apps to connect with different folks. And why make them come to a store to do that when they can do that at home and provide more flexibility for them? So, that's been a pretty big win for us. And then as we look at grand openings and what it takes to interview thousands of people to staff a store with upwards of 400 new employees, we've actually got a grand opening staffing team approach that also allows folks from anywhere in the company to help be support in recruitment for a new store opening. So some of those things have really allowed us to think outside of the box and provide more flexibility for our people.
So I heard piloting I heard from everyone, piloting, testing, listening. You're reworking things, improving things in real time. So I think that's important to point out. This is the future of work. So it's not a set and done. This is what it is, and you don't go back to it. You're continuing to improve the experience for people. And as we heard, flexibility looks very different for each of you, for each of your industries and your employee population. So that said, for those in the room who are feeling inspired, you've all been through this for a few years now. Is there one lesson or piece of advice you'd like to each share after having gone through this yourselves? What should people listening be mindful of? Anyone can jump in and start.
I'll start.
Please, Blaine.
I'd start by saying, listen to your people. One of the things that I like to challenge our team with is, don't come with an answer to a question that hasn't been asked yet. Meaning don't rely on answers that may have worked in the past. We have to continue to challenge ourselves to be flexible, to be the best listener, to have one-on-one connections with each of our people. Something that we know is really, really important. And, focus on what is possible versus what's not possible. How can you find a way to say yes? We're able to do that through surveying. We're constantly thinking about our next survey and how do we collect feedback. The one that we're going to be working on now and as a retailer is how do we collect feedback from our people on holiday scheduling? We know that the holidays, especially in the food business, are very busy, and our customers rely on us to be there for their meals and their holiday meals and to help them make great meals easy. But there's an impact on our people. And so I think we want to learn more as an organization on what our employees are looking for. What would they like to see around holiday scheduling? So I guess my advice would be to listen, try to find a solution, and then ultimately continue to ask through surveys how you can be better.
And I was just going to pick up on Blaine's earlier point about the test and learn approach. I don't think that you can do enough there. I think that it all comes down to kind of some of the tactical considerations, because you might have the best idea in the world and then in execution you don't want to fall down, right? So that's the point at which you can test different tools, technologies. For us, when we think of flexible scheduling or even our iJobs program, we have some scheduling tools. We've identified the places where we need to make enhancements, right? And we want to do some of that before we go more broadly with other groups. I think that too, if you have we're a global company. We're certainly across every state in the United States, and there are different things happening in different jurisdictions, right? Like you need to understand and take all of that into account and think here too about how you can make flexibility relevant to everyone, but know that it's not going to be the same for all. And then in terms of that testing and learning, just constantly revisiting. I think that that's absolutely part of the measurement and feedback that Blaine's alluding to. And I think it's just constantly having your ear to the ground so that you can be nimble and make adjustments, because it is a new world we're in. And I think that we're trying to adjust, but you have some kind of interesting light bulb moments like learning that, maybe a reduced work week isn't perfect for certain parts of your population, but maybe something else suits them really well. And for us, it's been about fitting those puzzle pieces together, right? Like, okay, flexible scheduling can be a harder thing on that manager, right? Like they're really having to do a lot more logistical things. But if we're offering more part-time roles, then actually we have a lever there that we can be fitting in and making all this work for everyone. But I don't think you figure all of that out until you test it.
Yeah, and I would offer, Blaine and Diana, I love hearing about your work and how you're implementing this at such a large scale and with so many different worker profiles. And I think, one of the things that I've learned having done this in multiple different enterprise settings is that it's a transformation and a different way of doing business. So it's not, it can be tempting to see this as a talent policy, but for instance, Diana, when you're introducing greater complexity and having people work 4 days instead of 5 days, and that changes how you manage shifting, assigning shifts, that is a different type of business problem. And we certainly have our own different ways that we need to consider how we do business as a result of how we've changed our talent outlook. And that is a full-time transformation job. So one of the things that I think a lot of companies are missing today is a full-time transformational person who can develop strategies across a myriad set of cross-functional issues and develop testable, data-driven answers to those strategies so that you can really see how to change things over time. So, at Atlassian, I think sometimes it was counterintuitive to set up a research team within my team. But I also always try to remind people that, you can't just set up a totally new way of doing business and assume that it's correct. You constantly have to validate whether or not these are business strategies that deliver core value to the business, because that's why a business takes on this type of transformative change. So building, for instance, the data capability to be able to do that was something that was very difficult for me to do on day one. And another thing that we do constantly, and in particularly because of our business being a collaboration software company, is we run experiments all the time using our tools and behaviors to understand how to manage knowledge work, how to make progress together, how to define shared goals. And we've had over 4,000 Atlassians participate in those experiments and are constantly learning what works so that we can recommend and scale solutions that truly do work for the business, as opposed to kind of offering something untested, which then may or may not work, which then creates churn and distrust. So, I guess the big thing that I want to share here is that this is work that has to be really done well in order to support the variety of stakeholders that are necessary to satisfy at the board level, at the executive level, and to make sure that your day-to-day employees have enough bandwidth to keep experimenting with you and that you're using their time well. And that requires full-time staffing and the right capabilities like data and strategy that aren't always present in today's portfolio of talent strategies.
And if I may, I'd love to pick up on something, Annie, that you just said around it also not just being a talent issue, but a business strategy and business problem, because I think that's the other piece, right? Like once you have the data, once you've done the work, the change management around sponsorship, around getting that leadership from the top for any of these initiatives is also really crucial, and I think becomes an important aspect of all of this. I think once you can do that, like it was not going to be necessarily our HR organization alone pushing anything. We were going out to all of the GMs of all of these hotels and having them talk to each other to share their best practices and show how flexibility was truly solving a business problem for them when it came to operating hotels, particularly post-pandemic. And so, yeah, just wanted to really echo that. I think it's a really important point there as well.
Let's also just stay here for a minute in terms of lessons learned, just piggybacking on what you've all said. This is for Diana and Annie. I know from our prep calls, some things I also learned was so someone might be listening and thinking, oh, okay, at Marriott, people can choose their own schedule, and at Atlassian, you can work wherever you want, whenever you want, but it's hard to do. It's not that simple, right? So I know at Atlassian, There are shared, so maybe Anne, you can speak to this first before I have a question for Diana. There are shared, I don't think I've heard this come up yet, shared time zones. There's collaborative time. So even though you're working wherever you want, you do have a primary geographical location. You are expected to have some overlap in collaboration and work time. So do you mind just talking a little bit about that? I think that's a great lesson learned.
Yeah. I think again, when you think about running a business differently as opposed to having having this just be a talent policy, is that if you want to give people greater flexibility in where they choose to live, you still have to design teams in an effective way. And our research has shown that what it means to be effective is that everyone within a given team has about a half a day of working hours overlap. So we don't mandate that they're working together during that time period, but we want them to have by default availability so that they can easily reach each other to unblock issues and problems. If you're among the most senior people at the company, managing the most senior people at the company, you can have a little less overlap. And if you're among the earliest career people at the company, you want to actually have even greater overlap than half the day, because you want to have the lowest friction environment to get your questions answered. And that means that we have to be rigorous and thoughtful about where people are located. The business will never choose what working environment a person has. For instance, they'll never be mandated to go to the office. They'll never, they can have, freedom as to where they are working in their home office, or, whether they are in the corporate office, or, right now we have a 90-day policy where you can work from a different location. I work from a place outside of New York City during the summer months so that my kids can, live outside of our small closet apartment and have a lawn for a minute. And yet that doesn't impact my time zone, so therefore it doesn't impact my team. But the business needs to make smart choices about where people are located so that those conditions for collaboration are in place all the time. And so you have to make sure that the business knows and is equipped to navigate those choices, because I think that that's a discipline that we're still learning. It used to be that a company's footprint was just based on an office and a city, and you just bring everyone to that office or city. And now you have vast, many thousands more miles of coverage in terms of where an employee can be located. But you still need to set up the conditions for both connection and effectiveness that I mentioned at the top of this call.
Yep, I just wanted to double down on that. We're glad you've gotten out of your box apartment. We can see the lawn. We're enjoying the view. I don't know who cuts that thing, but that's not for this. So Diana, it's something similar. Again, these aren't just, a talent initiative. This is a whole workforce, a new way of doing business. So when you mentioned, employees can now, pick their schedules, which is great. Others might say, well, geez, how does that work? That's not going to be like a nightmare. Can we actually do this? And I know you had some, lessons learned around that. It's not that simple is the point I'm trying to make. So can you share a little bit about what that looks like and what that means in practice?
Yeah, absolutely. And here again, we did do the work to, we piloted, right? Like we had our proof of concept. We learned a lot from doing this in some particular markets, taking that back, et cetera. But you're right, it's hard, right? And it puts more on that manager to try to figure out the scheduling. And what I would say is that it is not so much associate picking their days than associate and manager sitting down to collaborate on a schedule that reflects, their needs. And that doesn't mean that they necessarily are always going to get everything and every day, but that there is now a real priority put on trying to offer, flexibility that works for now, maybe more different types of talent. And I would say that there's a little bit of a virtuous cycle here, which is the more flexibility you can offer, the more, you can kind of expand your talent pool as well. And now offer things that other people, otherwise might not have considered hospitality for because they had previously thought it to be just a much more rigid arrangement. So you do sit down, you do work through it. It has to work for the business as well as for that individual. And then you do, as I said, kind of play with the puzzle pieces of trying to put together, because you do need to have coverage of the shifts. But we have technology to support us as well, right? Like we have scheduling tools. As I mentioned, we've identified further enhancements we plan to be making to these tools. There's mobile app, there's easy options for picking up shifts, offering shifts, all of that type of thing does then contribute to sort of that work. But no, really, you're right. It's not a flip the switch, now you can easily do it. It's training for managers, it's resources for managers, it's resources for associates, it's talking them through, and then a lot of best practice sharing around what is working, how can you offer these types of things, and then looking at what you offer and then fitting it together.
Yeah, thanks for expanding on that. Just think it's important to make that point. Like anything, culture work is hard. It's not easy. It's a long game, and you have to be dedicated to it. And everyone on this call is obviously. So let's.
I feel like I just feel like I'd be remiss if I said like, and this is maybe a little bit like what Blaine was saying. And then there are folks that they are not interested in participating in that way either, right? Like it's also offering the option that there are plenty of associates on the team that are very happy with the current way of doing things. And so how do you accommodate that as well? And I think that that's also important, that it's not just, whole hog pulling everyone along in a place that isn't working for them. It's finding something that works for all. So I just want to acknowledge that as well.
Agreed. So let's, I'm going to ask my final question before we open it up to questions from the audience, and that is measurement. I know we'd all love to hear the result of all this work everyone has been doing in terms of the impact on the employee experience or the business or both. I will just quickly mention we have created an action guide for our customers around how to use our Great Place to Work survey data to benchmark how you're doing when it comes to flexible work. Yeah, for our panelists, I'd love to hear some results. It can be anecdotal, it can be hard numbers of the impact of flexible work. Anyone can chime in. I will just maybe have Diana, why don't you start us off, and then Annie and Blaine can chime in as well.
Sure. And I'll refer to my notes. I mean, I know that you mentioned the guide, Rula, that you had. I think that the Trust Index survey can kind of highlight some categories, and then what we tend to do is really drill down with them. So we did do a survey of our managers at our hotels about our flexibility program. So some of our results, which we were very, very pleased with, and then also gives us, of course, areas for further exploration. We did have 83% of respondents who said they were familiar with the program are satisfied with it. And 86% are more likely to recommend Marriott as an employer because of it. And 91% of people leaders indicated the program benefits their team. So those are very encouraging. But moreover, we found that those taking advantage of the program were more likely to report they are satisfied with their job, intend to stay with Marriott, and are more likely to recommend Marriott as an employer. The other piece that I would say that was interesting in our survey results is that, when you think about some of the change barriers, right, like, implementation, this is going to be really challenging. 73% indicated the program has already or will in the future make it easier to staff their department. Which to me means that, like, okay, like end objectives, like we're getting there, right? Like it's hard, but once you can figure it out, it's paying off. And then this is unrelated to the survey, but I'd acknowledge that there are, of course, then worries that, new programs like this could impact the guest experience. And for us, we have found no impact to guest satisfaction scores. And in fact, we suspect that over time, increased engagement, that always leads to better guest satisfaction. And then the last one that I would just share had pulled up some of our data around iJobs, so our broader jobs. And at our hotels that have converted to iJobs, not only are associate engagement scores higher, but we're seeing higher service and intent to recommend scores from guests. So for us, like, all signs point to green. We have to, of course, continue to refine, ensure that we are meeting the needs of all. But our results have been very positive here. And again, with either positive or neutral impact to guests, this is kind of a winning formula for us.
And I can jump in next. Similarly, we're always trying to understand, again, like we created the program because we wanted to have greater engagement with employees and loyalty, greater access to talent, and more innovation for our customers. And so our success metrics look across those different landscape areas. On the engagement side, 92% of Atlassians say that Team Anywhere allows them to do their best work. And 91% of them are saying that it's an important reason why they stay at Atlassian. That's a really strong endorsement from our employee base. When it comes to access to talent, we get 2 times the number of candidates per open role, and we fill open roles 20% faster. We also know that it's the program is highly attractive to candidates because our workforce is now 40% remote. And what I mean by that is that they are more than 2 hours commutable distance from our office using the Google API Monday morning commute. And that's up from just 25% 2 years ago. And 57% of our hires in the past year have been remote. When we look at product innovation, we're doing a huge push around AI right now. We just released, not yet to the public, but we announced in April our new tool that we have access to internally called Rovo, which is an AI teammate that helps you find anything, iterate on your ideas, manage workflows, etc. We did a landscape study externally and found that teams who are adopting AI in these ways are 2 times more effective. So again, using this model of working across a distance and using technology to improve our outcomes seems to work for the bottom line. I'll turn it over to you, Blake.
Yeah, thank you. When you think of work-life flexibility, there's a direct correlation to retention, and that's in retail really important to our company. And each year we conduct 2 focus groups in every location to see what our folks are looking for relating to this. And after we set that or implemented the set day off a week, the following survey we went up by 3 points in work-life flexibility just by implementing that new guideline for our folks. And it was well received, and we're still doing that today. Coming out of the pandemic, we wanted our leaders throughout the company to be more proactive in work-life flexibility effort because our people told us that that's what they needed. People are encouraged to balance their work life and personal life. And we made that a bigger focus starting in 2021, especially amidst the Great Resignation and difficult staffing and people changing jobs. And we did pulse surveys as well as 2 focus group questions in every location. And since 2021, we've seen a 5+ point improvement as an organization on that. So, it has to be intentional. If it were easy, we'd all be doing it, and it's not. But through consistent work, we all can continue to improve our businesses for our people.
Thank you, everyone, for your thoughtful answers and sharing those results, which are very impressive. Ceci, I'm going to ask you to come back on the screen and open up the discussion for questions, time permitting.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. And we have a little bit of time, so I think that we're good. There's a lot of questions coming in, so let's get started. I'll start with you, Diana. There's a question that came in recently just when you were talking about the metrics. Some of the metrics you mentioned are, have you added any custom statements to the survey that you implement with Great Place to Work, and are you able to share those?
Yeah, so let me just clarify. So I think that we have the Trust Index survey where we did not add specific questions regarding our the various components of our flexibility programs. But like I think many of you out there, we do look at those Trust Index survey results to maybe identify those places where we do ourselves want to dig deeper. So the survey that I was alluding to was sort of a secondary survey that we did following up with a specific part of our population on the different components of our flexibility program. So asking about the different types of offerings, who's taking advantage of what, and their levels of satisfaction with those areas. So hopefully that clarifies.
Thank you so much, Diana. Annie, this is a question for you. There's a lot of questions around how do you handle allowing employees to work from anywhere in terms of tax implications, and when they need to commute to the office, and they're far away, does Atlassian cover travel expenses and those type of things?
Yes. So Atlassians don't work from anywhere, meaning that on day one, on Monday, they work from Tokyo and Tuesday they work from London, right? They have a permanent zip code where their tax and compliance profile is fully managed. The only time that they have quote unquote permission to step outside of that zip code is the 90-day period where you can work from a different location. For instance, where I am, here in an area outside of New York as opposed to New York City, but my time zone doesn't change. And so therefore the tax and compliance profile is managed from their permanent address. And when it comes to commuting, so we're able to recognize a lot of cost savings as a business due to our constrained real estate footprint. So it used to be that as we would grow our employee base, and we have doubled our employee base over the past 3 or so years, that every time we'd have a new employee in, then we would basically add 150 square feet to our real estate portfolio projections, and that would yield a sizable and growing real estate portfolio. Now we treat it completely differently, almost like a hospitality approach, where it's sort of like a membership model where we look at actual projections of attendance and then project that actual attendance forward into the subsequent quarters to understand how engagement within a local community translates into in-person attendance. And because of that constrained real estate portfolio, it gives us the opportunity to invest those savings differently. And that's how we support programs like the Intentional Togetherness Gathering Program, which brings people from all over the world into our global offices. So for instance, my leadership team is divided between New York City, San Francisco, and Australia. When we come together, that might mean that we're meeting in San Francisco because that's the kind of central point where we can all meet. And then we're able to fund the travel for all of those participants to go to the San Francisco office. And we don't have a strict commuter policy there. If you are an official remote worker, yes, there is coverage and support for getting into the office for those types of ITG, intentional togetherness events. But I also am a stickler for not being overly didactic about bright lines on where people are located, because I think it can create really negative sort of disjointed policy outcomes, where we want to think about policies as giving people the opportunity to live within time zone bands and the opportunity to come to the office if they want to. So I try to avoid those kind of, if you're X number of miles from the office, because those get translated into different types of worker types, et cetera, and ours are meant to be much more fluid.
Thank you so much, Annie. That's super helpful. And I hope it answers questions that we're receiving. One last question for you, Blaine. I think that we can close it up and follow up with other questions afterwards through email. In terms of your workforce, how do you create equality of experiences for those who are working in a store and also and others working remotely? How do you manage those two worlds?
Well, I think they're managed similarly but differently. A lot of our folks that are working remotely may be in more of an individual contributor role, where a lot of what they do is via phone. A lot of our corporate folks will ensure that they're connected with any of their team that's in the office that did go in to our corporate office. We also recently have been able to expand remote work. Pre-pandemic, many of our roles that were corporate were all at our headquarters in Rochester, New York. And, very recently in the last few years, we've begun to job post many positions that had historically been corporate roles and opened it up to the store employees, regardless of where they are, so that they have the opportunity to learn new things other than what they're learning in their stores or what they've learned, and be a part of the corporate team, even though they may be 3, 4, 5 states away from where our corporate office is. So technology certainly has enabled us to do that. And then it's up to each of the leaders in those groups to ensure that the folks that are remote feel just a bigger part of the team as the folks that may be in the office are.
Thank you so much, everyone, for all the questions answered. Rula, back to you.
Yes. I also just want to echo the thank you, all the thoughtful insights, practical tips, and it's extremely inspiring. I mean, we've heard Marriott's creating new job roles altogether, and the thoughtful work from Annie's team and Blaine's team. So I also want to just mention this as well. Again, we started at the top of the hour. We mentioned this report. This is our latest research with some of the findings on the screen. It's really packed with data around the impact of mandates on retention, productivity, managerial relationships. We do a deep dive on the benefits and risks of hybrid remote and in-office work by industry. We break that down. There's also data around well-being, mental health, and a lot more. So our hope really is you use this data to guide your decisions and to arm you when you're going into culture conversations. And for customers, I mentioned the action guide. Please reach out to your customer success manager or culture coach if you have any questions about that guide. Ceci, back to you. You are muted.
Thank you. Before we leave, there are 2 events coming up that I would love for all of you to save the dates. For those of you who are Great Place to Work certified, we invite you to join the celebration and be part of Certification Nation Day. This is a day to celebrate and promote your company culture. Being a Great Place to Work certified is special recognition because it reflects what employees' voices say about your workplace experience. So mark your calendars, October 16. All Great Place to Work certified companies around the world will be celebrating their culture. And if you've enjoyed today's conversation, sorry, for some reason my computer is not responding. If you've enjoyed today's session, we hope you can also save the day to connect, innovate, and lead our For All Summit at 2025 on April 8 to 10 in Las Vegas. You'll hear from more Great Place to Work experts like Rula and leaders from our Great Place to Work certified and best workplaces community, sharing inspiring practices and stories around creating great and high trust workplace cultures. So mark your calendars, April 8 to 10. Thank you for joining the Journey to Great webinar series. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. Remember, please, to complete the survey. It's only 4 questions right after the session ends. This will pop up on your screens. And also, you will be receiving an email with a follow-up email with the recording and additional resources, reports from some of the companies here, the one that we shared, the action guide for those who are customers. Last but not least, thank you, Annie, Diana, Blaine. This has been an amazing conversation. Rula, thank you so much for your expertise and for your time. I hope you all have a great rest of your day wherever you are. Thank you.